Hello everyone, welcome back to another Genshin Impact video. So I recently put out a poll asking what my viewers wanted to see next from me, and the why players find Yae Miko disappointing option won by a landslide. So here we are. We're going to be going over the 10 major reasons why many players found Yae Miko disappointing or underwhelming. I want to quickly preface this video by saying that this is not a Yae Miko hate video, because despite her shortcomings, I actually still really enjoy this character, and as I've already mentioned in my honest C0 review of Yae Miko, while she might not be a top pick in the current meta, I do still think that she's a strong unit so long as you build her properly and have the right team to support her. However, I still think that it's pretty important to go over the issues of her kit so that players that are currently on the fence about getting her can have a better understanding of if they actually want to use their primos or not. If you do end up finding this video helpful at all, please feel free to leave me a like and comment down below. It does help me boost into the YouTube algorithm and I'd greatly appreciate it. And if you want to see more Genshin Impact content like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button and click that notification bell. But with all that out of the way, let's get into the video. Reason number 1. She feels clunky. Many players have expressed that they think that Yae Miko's kit is pretty clunky in general, and I personally agree with this. While there are ways to get around these issues, it's definitely noticeable, and I honestly wish that some of these issues had been resolved in the closed beta. For example, her auto attacks really don't offer that much to her kit. While I do think that her auto attacks are absolutely beautiful, it can't be denied that they do weigh Yae Miko down. The animations for her auto attacks are very long, and they don't have high enough multipliers in order to make it worth it. On top of this, her auto attacks actually have a very short range, which can actually be very frustrating when an enemy is just outside of reach. I mainly bring this up because most Catalyst users don't suffer from this. In fact, characters like Sucrose, Mona, Kokomi, Yanfei, and Ningguang all have excellent range, which makes using their auto attacks on faraway enemies at least useful every once in a while. But unfortunately, Yae Miko finds herself in a similar position to Klee, where you have to be close to enemies in order to deal damage, and even when you're close enough to hit enemies, your attacks come out so slow unless you're animation canceling that many players will just end up not building her auto attacks in favor of her skill and burst. Reason number 2. No iframes on her elemental skill. I've seen this complaint a lot, and I can definitely understand the frustration considering that her elemental skill is so integral to her overall kit. In order to maximize Yae Miko's damage, you're definitely going to have to lay down all 3 skills whenever you're able to. But despite her elemental skill looking like a dash, it doesn't have any iframes, meaning that if an enemy hits you while you're casting your skill, you will get knocked back and could end up taking a lot of damage. Many players are saying that adding iframes would actually make a lot of sense and make her far more enjoyable to play. And while I agree with this, I don't even think that she necessarily needs iframes, because I would personally even just take super armor while laying down her skill. Obviously, taking damage is an issue, but from my personal experience, it's actually the knockback that can really mess up your rotations. So the simple addition of iframes or super armor during her skill could make a monumental difference. Something tells me that Hoyoverse thought that she would be a little bit too OP if she had access to 3 additional dashes, but I think that everyone that has Yae Miko would agree that it would be a lot more enjoyable to play her if you weren't constantly worried about getting knocked around every time you lay down her skill. Reason number 3. Too much screen time. Hoyoverse designed and marketed Yae Miko as a sub DPS unit, but for some reason, unlike most sub DPS units, you actually have to have her on the field a lot in order for her to complete her job. Essentially, to maximize her damage in a single rotation, you have to lay down her skill 3 times, activate your burst to deal damage, and then lay down your skill an additional 3 times. This amounts to roughly 6 seconds of total field time before you can switch over to your next character. Now, while 6 seconds might not seem like a long time, in Genshin Impact it actually is. Most sub DPS units come onto the field, use their elemental skill and or burst, and then immediately leave, and usually only take about 2 to 3 seconds to do so. Yae Miko essentially doubles this time, and unlike characters like Fischl, Yae Miko's skills don't deal damage to enemies when they're initially cast, making the actual activation of her elemental skill feel like a waste of time. On top of this, to ensure that you're dealing the maximum amount of elemental skill damage, you do have to make sure that you're laying down your elemental skills in a triangle, and all 3 also have to be close enough to the enemy in order to strike them regularly. So if you aren't purposeful with where you're laying them down initially, you may have to wait for her cooldowns to reset in order to make sure that you can lay them down properly, which again leads to more screen time and ultimately less time for the rest of your party members. I think this boils down again to style over substance, because while her elemental skill animation is beautiful, its actual practicality and use is definitely a little bit tedious. Reason number 4. Yae Miko can't snapshot. Unlike other Electro sub DPS units like Fischl and Beidou, who can snapshot attack boosts from characters like Bennett, Yae Miko unfortunately cannot snapshot any damage, so if you do end up using her on a team with Bennett, you have to make sure that you are within the field in order to be getting the damage boost. This really limits your mobility, and can definitely make it a lot harder to dodge enemies' attacks or chase them down if they leave the burst. For some reason, Hoyoverse is very finicky on which characters they allow to snapshot or not. For example, Xiangling can snapshot Bennett's burst, but for whatever reason Xingqiu can't. But being able to snapshot your damage and still be able to leave the burst radius or switch to another party member is always seen as very valuable. So many players find it disappointing that Yae Miko can't take advantage of this. At the end of the day, it's not the end of the world, but it definitely would have increased her overall viability as an off-field damage dealer if she could. Reason number 5. Her burst cost is way too high. For whatever godforsaken reason, Hoyoverse decided to make Yae Miko's elemental burst cost a whopping 90 energy. This is currently the highest cost burst, tied only with the Raiden Shogun herself. But unlike the Raiden Shogun who can refund herself energy, a C0 Yae Miko is definitely going to struggle to get their burst up unless they have a crazy amount of ER, or another Electro teammate that can help battery her. I think that the justification comes from the fact that her elemental burst does have very high scaling, but I think that it would only really be worth it if it had access to melt or vaporize. Because with such a high energy cost burst, you're basically forced into having at least one other Electro member on your team, or focus so much on ER that the rest of your substats might suffer. This is why Fischl and Raiden Shogun are currently her top picks in terms of energy batteries, because unfortunately Yae Miko's skills aren't enough to battery herself. I know that 10 energy might not seem like a lot, but even if Yae only had an 80 cost burst, it would make her rotations much easier to pull off. Every other Inazuma character has a 60 to 80 cost burst, so it really doesn't make much sense why Yae Miko has a 90 cost burst when characters like Ayaka, who has one of the best bursts in the game, requires 10 less energy. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't know why Hoyoverse did this, because it actually leads us into our next point. Reason number 6. Potential locked behind constellations. Now we already know that characters in Genshin Impact usually rely on their constellations in order to reach their max potential. However, with Yae Miko in particular, I find it extra frustrating because she doesn't feel complete at C0. For example, characters like Ayaka and the Raiden Shogun both feel complete at C0. While they do get massive power spikes in terms of damage from their constellations, their base kits still feel complete and easy to use. However, the reason why I have such a big issue with Yae Miko constellations is because they made an artificial problem, which is having such a high cost burst, and then immediately trying to sell you the solution to this problem with her Constellation 1. Because if you didn't already know, once you achieve Constellation 1, anytime Yae Miko uses her burst and it consumes one of her skills, it restores her with 8 energy per totem. So if you had 3 totems out on the field like you should, it takes your burst cost all the way from 90 down to 66. This is a huge boost to quality of life because it allows you to focus way less on energy recharge, and instead allows you to focus on maximizing your damage. The only other 5-star character that I can think of off the top of my head that has a pretty similar situation is Hu Tao, whose charge attack stamina cost is reduced at C1, and while some might say that this isn't a big deal and it's only C1 so you can get it if you really want to, I just don't like the idea of building a problem into a character's kit and then telling players that you can only get rid of this issue by using more primos or spending money. I don't know, it just feels a little bit disingenuous, but maybe that's just me. You'll also see many players complaining about the fact that so much of her damage is locked behind the rest of her constellations, and while I do agree since her totem damage can increase by over 100% at C6, I think that damage increases is far less of an issue than utility issues, so I really wish that her C1 or some version of her C1 was built directly into her kit. Reason number 7. Yae Miko currently doesn't have a best-in-slot artifact set. Now, while you can build Yae Miko with a plethora of different artifact sets, having a designated best-in-slot 4-piece set can easily be the difference between whether a character is merely good or meta. And unfortunately, there are no current artifacts that really boost Yae Miko into top tier. I think to make Yae Miko truly shine, we would probably need something like a 5-star version of the Gambler set, essentially something that would help maximize her elemental skill damage, or perhaps something similar to her C1 that would provide her with more energy particles in order to get her burst up more consistently. Something tells me that Hoyoverse probably already has something in the works, but it's a complete mystery why they didn't release it when she released. Because of this, Yae Miko has found herself in a similar position to characters like Child and Kokumi, who didn't get a designated artifact set upon their release, and instead got their best in slot at a later date, greatly improving their overall viability and usage. I think another great example of being held back by your artifact sets is definitely Xiao. Xiao is still an excellent damage dealer, but because he doesn't have a proper full 4-piece set, he often ends up falling behind other top-tier damage dealers. There are rumors that he might be getting a set in the future, and I really hope that's the case so he can reach his max potential. But until these designated artifact sets come out, both Xiao and Yae Miko are definitely going to suffer for it. So for now, in regards to Yae Miko, we'll have to deal with different 2-piece sets in order to maximize her damage, or use the 4-piece of Emblem of Severed Fate in order to give her a little more energy recharge and a higher burst damage. These are decent options for now, but it is very apparent that Yae Miko would see a huge boost in viability if she got her own designated set. Reason number 8. Yae Miko is too easily replaced. While I do think that Yae Miko probably is the current best off-field damage dealer for Electro, unfortunately there's just way too much competition within her own element. Because not only do we have the Raiden Shogun, who's one of the most coveted characters in Genshin Impact, but we also have not one but 2 4-star options that basically serve the exact same purpose. Both Fischl and Beidou are currently considered to be 2 of the best sub-DPS units in Genshin Impact, and while they might lose out on a little bit of damage compared to a well-built Yae Miko, with enough of their constellations they can actually outperform a C0 Yae Miko pretty easily, and neither of these characters are quite as clunky. I do think that Yae Miko does have much better synergy with characters like Raiden Shogun, but outside of this golden duo, 9 times out of 10 you can just replace Yae Miko with either Fischl or Beidou, and you're going to see very similar results. Obviously this all changes if you have a well-invested Yae Miko with her signature weapon and constellations, because then she'll blow the other 2 out of the water. But the simple fact is that the majority of players don't have access to these things, and 4-star characters are much easier to build and get constellations for. So I think that many players have to consider if she's actually worth the primos if you already have characters like Fischl and Beidou well built. Reason number 9. Yae Miko teams tend to be restrictive and rather expensive. While there are ways to build a free-to-play team, the majority of the best units to pair with Yae Miko tend to be 5 stars. For example, if you watch my top 5 Yae Miko teams video, you'll notice that Raiden Shogun, Kazuha, Kokumi, Jin, and Eula are all in the video. And while you can replace them with other units, you might not see as good results. For example, while you could run a budget team for a taser comp using Yae Miko, Sucrose, Xingqiu, and Fischl, the same team with 5-star options are going to outdamage it by a fair margin. So Yae Miko ends up feeling like a luxury character that needs luxury support units in order to reach her maximum potential. And our last reason, number 10, is there was too much hype for Yae Miko prior to her release. I cannot begin to tell you the amount of rumors that I saw that Yae Miko was going to be the next Ganyu, that she was going to be a top-tier meta-defining DPS unit, and one of the best main carries in the game. This is a reputation that is almost impossible to live up to, so obviously when she fell short of these expectations, a lot of people were very disappointed. I think that this is why it's so important to take rumors just as they are, just rumors, until the characters officially come out. This is because we never know what's actually going on behind the scenes at Hoyoverse, and any information that we hear prior to their release could be false information, meaning that it's always important to take what we hear with a big grain of salt. I understand why Yae Miko was so hyped up considering that she is so integral to the storyline, and the fact that we've seen and interacted with her since last year. So I think a lot of people expected a lot from this character, and as soon as she wasn't an absolutely broken character at release, a lot of players found themselves very disappointed. I think that Yae Miko ended up being a big lesson in learning how to manage your expectations for character releases, because even the most hyped up characters can end up falling a little bit flat. Like I said earlier, I don't think that Yae Miko is a bad character at all. In fact, I think that she's a pretty decent unit. It's just that all of these issues combined hold her back from being top tier. So long as you have decent artifact substats and a decent team in order to support her, she can easily clear all content in the game. It's just when other characters such as the Raiden Shogun, Kazuha, Ayaka, Ganyu, Hu Tao, etc. all exist and are going to be coming back at a later date, it makes it much harder to recommend Yae Miko over them. But again, this could change if Hoyoverse decides to revisit her character and her kit. So I'm curious, what do you currently think about Yae Miko? Do you think that this video's overview was fair, or do you think that she's fine as is? Feel free to leave me a comment down below, because I kinda want to hear what you guys have to say. If you want to see more videos regarding Yae Miko, I'll make sure to leave some links above and down below for you guys, since I did recently make an honest C0 review of her, tour, and a top 5 Yae Miko teams video, so make sure to check those out if you haven't already. And if you did end up enjoying the video, please feel free to leave me a like down below, since it does help support the channel. And if you want to see more Genshin Impact content from me, make sure to hit that subscribe button and click that notification bell. But that's all for now, so until next time, best wishes. Bye.